Greetings chosen, I've been waiting here for you since the beginning of this universe. You know the world is fading, there's a secret power hidden in your soul. Don't be afraid to use it. There are voices in your head saying that you're a failure. You're not good enough, but you know that's not true. There is a secret power hidden in your soul. Don't be afraid to use it, 'cause you're the one.
Greetings, coronavirus. Greetings, coronavirus survivors. Welcome back to Disenthrall. I am Patrick Smith. Today we have a really cool interview for you guys today with a presidential candidate in the Libertarian Party. We will introduce him in a moment. First, I want to announce, though, that the coronavirus has hit Dallas, Texas, and my supply lines of coffee have been destroyed, and so I will not have my large cup of coffee with me today. But we will find a way. I have some fizzy water with us. So I would like to invite to the show Mr. Rhett Smith. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Patrick. How are you doing?
I'm good. So Rhett Smith, you are a graduate of the University of Texas at Austin, 1973, BA in accounting. You were an auditor with the Texas Department of Human Services for 4 years. You were enlisted in the United States Navy for 4 years. You are a father, grandfather, proactive citizen who wants to ensure that your grandchildren will have the same opportunities that you do. You are a member of the Libertarian Party and are seeking the Libertarian nomination for president at the Libertarian Convention. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think it's going to be pretty interesting.
Yes.
You were, I guess, watching the spectacle that was the gubernatorial race here in Texas a couple years ago, in which I ran for not governor of Texas. And so I think you're familiar, at least with me and kind of the way I approach things. And so I really am looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent. We worked hard for during that campaign. And I was a candidate, but not on the state level. But I thought we had an excellent candidate. If we keep plugging, I think the Libertarians are going to make progress.
Well, let's get into it. So I guess I want my audience to get to know you. That's kind of the purpose of these interviews that we do when we are running as candidates in the party, right? So maybe just to start at the basics, tell us what you're doing. We kind of know the headline of what you're doing, but tell us what you're actually trying to do, what you're hoping to accomplish, and maybe how you're hoping to accomplish it.
Good. Well, why I left all those other parties in politics and came to the Libertarian Party. I was very alarmed, as every American was that remembers 9/11 and the attack on the World Trade Center. But I couldn't figure out at all what was going on. I was just clueless, I watched it on TV, and it was years later that, things started to come together, and all the investigations, and we don't really need to get into the conspiracies of 9/11, but basically I realized that unless we have a more libertarian style base for our entire nation, a libertarian style mindset, that I don't think America's going anywhere. Having been in those two major parties, I realized that it was just total brainwashing, and that's why I finally, migrated to the Libertarian Party. At first, I did not know about the Libertarian Party on September 11th, 9/11, or 2001, and so it took me years to learn, and I've been very pleased. But initially, it just seemed like the libertarians were, out off in the weeds somewhere, and I couldn't. They just didn't connect with me. I couldn't understand what was going on. And now,
wait, are you saying that it's different? Your impression is different now? they're not in the weeds now.
No, most libertarians today, I think, are aware of the duopoly and are aware of. I think if you go back to 1972 and all that, the initiation of the modern Libertarian Party, that was just a handful of people that were really disgruntled Republicans, and were trying to find a way, not to be overwhelmed by one political party. And so now I think we do have a base. I think the Libertarians are one of the most successful third-party movements in the history of the United States. But, we're still struggling. What is wonderful is that we've been able to stay alive for decade after decade. And most third parties just fade away, as you know.
So why are you running? What do you hope to accomplish?
Number one, to teach history, to use this campaign as a way to awaken, our need to reconnect with our past. Even young libertarians in the party today, I think older libertarians maybe kind of get it. You've seen the need to create archives of the Libertarian Party to try to remind America that the Libertarian Party has been around for decades and has been, touting the same platform and message and trying to awaken America. So we need to continue that process. But I really want to turn back the clock and recapture the days of the American Revolution and make that accessible to our young libertarians.
So to just basically achieve some level of, a louder voice to reach people with a message of what exactly?
Well, once we do connect with people and realize that it's in their hands, the voters, citizens, and taxpayers in every state can, empower their states. The whole basis of the American Revolution is the 13 colonies and the Articles of Confederation, and finally getting 13 states, new states, to come together. And that's still the basis of power. We need to re-empower and reawaken the sovereignty of the states and the ability of the states to deal with global affairs and all the issues. So when all these candidates are talking about, a range of issues, we have, I think on the Texas Free Press, there's 35 questions. If you've looked over that document that is published by Neil Dykman, there's a lot of questions about platform. The Libertarian Party has a 4-article platform or 4-section platform, but without the reawakening of the American Constitution, without the respective states, we're not going to be able to accomplish anything. It's the power is in the state houses to control the deep state, to control the Federal Reserve, to control all the things that are out of control. You can't do it, by a traditional method. You have to go back and recapture the power of the respective states.
What would you say is the prime directive of the Libertarian Party?
The prime directive is, to me, education. That, the great work of the Cato Institute, the great work of other libertarian historians and scholars, that is the way, by reconnecting and invigorating our past and teaching young people about our past, that is the way, that is the pathway forward. That is the future. And we can ignore that and let somebody else educate the people, because really, Patrick, every generation has to be re-educated. In other words, the old generation is passing away, the new generation is coming. They don't know anything. It's a blank slate. And if you and I are not out there educating young people, what happens? It's not good.
So Wouldn't it be accurate to say that all of those things, those structures, have already failed at their stated goal of protecting my liberty?
No way.
Really?
No way. Just the fact that the duopoly, has really, I would say it's the duopoly. People are realizing that the duopoly is a failure. Now people are looking around for a new basis, a new principles and values, and those old principles and values work very well if you go back before the duopoly.
So you're saying that the problem is not okay. Let's back up. So, have you heard of the non-aggression principle?
Of course, yes. We just had a long discussion with that on the Texas Libertarian Radical Caucus today.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Well, what does it mean to you?
And so, as you know, there was I can't remember which convention, but you see our chairman, Nicholas Sarwark, actually saying that there is no convention definition of the non-aggression principle. It's part of our party. We've talked about it for a long time, but there is no official definition in the party of what that means.
Do you see that as a problem?
No, I don't see it as a problem. I think it's kind of hard to define aggression. And I did some quick research on Google and shared that on the Libertarian Caucus. But I think that, we can argue about who's aggressive and who's not aggressive. But, it's not easy to work with new words. I mean, the other political parties don't really worry about that. They just kind of overlook it. And I'm glad that the Libertarian Party wants to think outside the box and try to come up with new definitions for new ideas.
So is there anything that you think the government does now that it should not be doing?
Well, Patrick, come on. You were I can't remember exactly your platform, but
that wasn't sarcasm. A legitimate question. I wasn't trying to. That wasn't a shot at you or anything. It was just. So yeah, it sounds like your answer is yes. Obviously, there is, right?
Just a good discussion point, because libertarians have long held that many of the things the government does should not occur, and it's getting worse. It's not getting better. Spying on people, probably the way we manage our money and banking system, the way we teach history, our education system, our foreign policy, all of the above.
So is there like one or two things maybe specifically that really bother you that the government does that you don't think it should do?
Well, now that I've awakened, we talk about the woke movement and all the Democrats that think they're woke because, they they feel like that they're oppressed. Of course, it's their own people that are oppressing them, but we need a woke movement in the Libertarian Party and get all the libertarians on the same page. So we need to turn the clock back to the American Revolution and start looking at that incredible history and getting reawakened to that.
So nothing specific comes to mind. I'm just looking for. Give me like your.
What do you want? Like we're going to go out and change something? I mean, what specifically?
Just
to change the world.
You personally, what are like one or two or three things that you really think the government has no business in, or that you feel is immoral for the government to be doing?
Well, you could talk about human rights. I've been here in San Antonio and Bexar County, which is a wonderful learning experience for me. I grew up in a small town in North Texas, and I wasn't aware of the cultural divide or the colonial era that is still predominant, so obvious here in San Antonio, and to realize, that all the things that we learn from early childhood are culture that really predisposes the way we view the world. So I've started something here in San Antonio. Maybe you've heard of it, called the Pluralism Project. Pluralism, it's not easy to say, Pluralism Project. And it's it's patterned after what's going on at Harvard University in Boston. And I was up there last year and visiting with, and I had heard about the Pluralism Project because I'm very active in religion and the interfaith movement, religious movements. And so I really was very interested when I was in Boston to go to Harvard and visit and learn more about that, and I did. And then this past last month or 2 months ago, we have something in San Antonio we call Dream Week. So Dream Week occurs during what we call Martin Luther King Week, which is a big event here in San Antonio. The city has a Martin Luther King Commission, which they plan for all year. And then they started something called Dream Week, which is about Martin Luther King's dream. And then it just expanded from a few activities to hundreds of activities at different venues around the city. And so my contribution this year was the Pluralism Project, and I did it at a Krishna Center. So the one at Harvard was really created more than 25 years ago by Dr. Diane Eck, E-C-K, Diane Eck, and she's a great scholar, and she did a lot of her work about the history and culture of India, in Hindu religion in India. And so that project is going strong in Boston, and I am trying to use that as a way. It's not just religious pluralism, but also cultural pluralism. And culture is what defines who we are, what we are, and how we relate to the world. And unless we're willing to take a broader view, I think we're stuck in the past. And so I'm really happy to have an opportunity to bring a better view, a much expanded view to the rest of the world.
What is something the government has done to you or in your personal life that you object to?
Certainly the tragedies of the Vietnam War, and then seeing I've gotten more active with the veterans community. I was during my service in the United States Navy. It was post-Vietnam era, so I entered the service in 1979 for 4 years. And I got the opportunity to make some cruises I was on 2 destroyers and an aircraft carrier, and twice in the Mediterranean, and once through the Suez Canal into the Indian Ocean. Anyway, so even though I'm concerned about the way America views itself in the world and the way the Department of Defense operates, it's not one of the greatest polluters in the world. It is the greatest polluter in the world, the U.S. Department of Defense, because with all the activities that they're engaged in. But what I'm concerned about is the way right after 9/11 and realizing as the years went by, these how many years have passed? 19 years. The way that the young people, when they were entered the service, and some of them not so young, it seemed like
you personally. What has the government done to you personally that you object to? Like in your personal life, what has the government done to you?
Well, continued the duopoly and led us to believe that, like today's a perfect example. Today is, we had the Texas primary Super Tuesday election. So I hope that you're going to tell all your listeners that if they did not participate in that primary, that they can go out and join us in a convention. But we need to, it's personally not allowing, third parties to participate, trying to deny the third parties. In other words, just the whole brainwashing that's been going on, and this occurs it really steps up as you, if you want a quick history lesson,
No. I was just wanting to know, like, something that you personally object to, like taxation. Do you
somebody stole my cookie or something? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
There's no simple answer to that, Patrick, and I hope that none of your other presidential candidates made a simple answer to that either.
Have you ever gotten a speeding ticket you didn't think was right?
It happens all the time, but these are minor.
Hey, that's one. Have you ever gotten taxed for something that you didn't think you should have been taxed for?
Patrick, minor incidents compared to the major incident, which is how does America relate to the world? How do we understand our universe? So I know you're trying to bypass this and you don't want to talk about the universe of all things and how we're going to understand each other. But I think if real libertarians really want to make a difference in the world, we have to review the way we see the world and how we see ourselves.
Yeah, but if I'm going to interview you, you got to answer one of my questions, like at least one, right?
I was arrested one night, Patrick, driving.
Okay, tell us about that.
I was good. I was driving from my hometown to San Antonio, and I had been earlier in the day at a funeral for my aunt, and I was driving back, and it was a little winding, dark country road and 2 lanes, and so I'm really not too much aware. I was trying to pass another vehicle, and you can imagine it's not real safe on a 2-lane country road at night, winding and dark. And later, what turned out to be the Lampasas County deputy sheriff was up behind me, and I didn't understand what was going on. At the time, we were really not going very fast. We were going below the speed limit. And, a couple of miles down the road, like 5 or 10, they call for a backup. This whole procession where I'm following other cars, everybody finally slows down. I'm the first car that stops, and the deputy runs up and drags me out of the car. After he said, "Put your hand out of the car," I put one hand out of the car. He puts a handcuff on me and drags me out of the car. And what's wrong with you? What's going on? Oh man, you're speeding, and you got to be kidding. I wasn't, not at this time. I don't know. I didn't really pay attention to what I was doing 10 miles down the road, or before we got here. Anyway, so then he wants to search my car.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. I'll give you permission to search my car. Maybe that was a dumb idea, but it doesn't really produce anything fruitful. He comes back with my shaving kit, and he says, "Oh, there's a red tablet here in your shaving kit. What is this?" I said, "Well, it looks like one of those little tablets the dentist puts in your mouth and makes you chew so that he can see all the plaque in your mouth." And then he says, real suspiciously, "Have you been to the dentist lately?" Anyway, they throw me in the back, and I'm handcuffed, and they somehow or another, they asked me to wear a seatbelt,
Mm-hmm.
while I'm being taken to jail. So I spent the night in jail waiting to see I guess a magistrate or something this morning. And the next morning I got out. But until you've had your civil rights violated, most Americans probably don't know what that feels like. And unfortunately, I'll say that a lot of white people don't know what that feels like. But for people that are not white or people that are minorities, that I have learned of and met all these people now that I'm in San Antonio. Every single family, and I know many minorities, Mexican, African American families, and if they haven't personally had an experience like that, they know a family member that has had their civil rights violated.
Oh, absolutely. That's terrible that happened. What was the actual charge?
It was evading arrest.
Oh,
Evading arrest, and it almost ruined my career because I'm a licensed private security officer, and I didn't realize I had no clue what was going on. So this goes on for weeks and weeks, then months and months. I'm still trying to look for another job because my employer tells me, by the way, we found out if you're charged with evading arrest in Texas, which is a misdemeanor, but it's a Class A, it's the highest level of misdemeanor.
mm-hmm.
You can no longer work as a private security officer in the state of Texas. So this goes on for months and months. Finally, a family relative who was an attorney contacts the prosecutor there in that county, and we negotiate it down to a speeding charge. And I get to pay, a $400 speeding ticket, and I get then I get to go back to work and get my job back.
Oh man, aren't you thankful for the benevolence of the system? I'm kidding. I'm being sarcastic. That's terrible.
It's always, not what you know, it's who you know, right? And
So I would never, just for the record, I would never support a government or a group of people doing anything like that to anyone. You know, I would never support something like that. That's terrible. I'm sorry that happened to you.
Here's the other kind of the balancing, because I really felt, I really felt misused at that point. But as I was searching for another job, I was receiving some unemployment compensation. So at the termination of this whole process, then I get my job back, and the Department of Workforce, I can't remember the exact name, but the one that pays the state unemployment, they come back and they want all that money back that they paid me, that small compensation that I was getting, a weekly or monthly check to survive. They want all that payment back.
Yeah. Uh-oh, did we lose you?
But
well, we'll see if Microsoft technology picks him back up here in a second. All right, I think you're back. Are you there?
Okay. I can't see you, but if you can hear me, we're good.
Okay, it looks like Skype is reconnecting now, so that's good.
Good. So to conclude the story, they let me keep the small compensation that I had received during those 2 months of unemployment. I didn't have to pay it back.
Wow. Okay, so opposite question. Is there any valid roles of government? Is there anything that you would validate or support the government doing?
So let me take you on this journey to understand the universe we live in. And a lot of people, want to talk about, national sovereignty, or how, European colonialism, or on and on. But I would remind you that without anything, I would use the term indigenous, an indigenous planet, an indigenous universe. So if there is nothing out there except, the cavemen, the paleo, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Good. What some have called the paleo libertarian. If there's only paleo libertarians and we're living in caves, I don't see how we get guns. I don't see how we get roads. I don't see how we get prescription medications. We don't get any of those things without some kind of government regulation. But assuming that there is nothing out there, I think the government, at the least, can offer a way for one human to learn about another human, and maybe share information, and learn how to have controlled aviation, learn how to have hot air balloons, learn how to do something that connects us with the universe, the reality of how in the world can humans explore and develop the solar system if we don't have some way to have science and technology and communicate.
Are you saying that to have science and technology and to communicate, we need the government? I
do. And even I know that the early universities were not really. It was really the students. The way I understand, 500 or however many years ago it was, that universities started in Europe. That it was really students that put together the university. It really wasn't so much the. You can imagine the fiefdoms and the kingdoms that were in Europe 1,000 years ago or something. So, I know that people on their own can do fantastic things, but I think that government can help individuals reach out to other individuals. I used to work for the Texas Highway Department, so I can only imagine what kind of highway system we would have if the Texas Highway Department had not been existent, and you just let, whoever build whatever road they want.
Yeah, it might actually function.
It won't. I guarantee you. It's not easy to build a road, Patrick. And I did it for a number of years.
So are all forms of taxation and tariffs and fees theft?
Well, yeah, according to Daniel. Daniel's a great guy, but Daniel relies on the government a lot more than he realizes. And I'm sure that he doesn't want to pay the government any little tidbit, but there are a lot of things that it's hard to imagine a world that we're benefiting from today. You and I could not have this conversation with this kind of technology without the government.
So is that a no or a yes? Is all taxation theft?
So all taxation is not theft. And of course, our libertarian platform, sir, as you're well aware, because I'm
not part of that hour, but go ahead.
The libertarian platform doesn't say that all taxation is theft. It kind of implies that we would only allow the taxes that are constitutionally required.
Well, the Libertarian Party doesn't, the platform of the Libertarian Party doesn't determine truth, so thankfully we don't need to rely on it for the definition of theft. So what forms of taxation are not theft?
That's an excellent question, because supposedly in the United States, whether it's a lie or not, it's voluntary. Our income taxation is voluntary. So I guess they would say that that's not theft because it's voluntary. And of course, the Libertarian platform calls for the voluntary funding of all government functions.
So I certainly don't consent to a single dime of taxation. So doesn't that make it, definitionally theft?
Okay. But, in other words, so you're saying that really as libertarians that we have to throw out, 1,000 years of history because there's some governance in there that help transform the world we live in. Maybe in detrimental ways, maybe in violent ways, but the government wasn't antithetical to progress necessarily. Some cases they were, but not all cases.
I'm not making any grandiose statements. I'm simply saying that I don't personally consent, and so doesn't that make it theft?
If you don't personally consent to paying any taxes, I think that you can avoid taxes, sir. There's got to be a way to do it. If you're really serious about never ever paying a tax, and we could certainly agree. I think even Donald Trump said it's counterproductive and antithetical to what government does to be involved with taxing people who are in poverty, and that's what we do. Our whole system one reason for poverty is taxation, because what we're doing, we don't give poor people a pass. If your poverty is so great, why should we tax him? But you don't get a pass. We're gonna tax you no matter how impoverished you are. We're gonna tax you, and we shouldn't be doing it at all.
Well, I'm not part of that we, for damn sure. So is there anything that you get taxed for? Is there anything that your money that is stolen from you in the form, well, let's use your language. Is there any money that is taxed from your wallet that is used for something that you find morally objectionable? And if so, name something.
Conducting global foreign policy, which is very expensive, when we don't understand the universe. In other words, we have political leaders in the duopoly, as all libertarians know, and as you and I are going to talk about. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, these people have what the expression is. You've probably heard this expression: the differences in foreign policy end at the water's edge. So the Republicans and Democrats have generally approved of U.S. foreign policy around the world, and it's horrific, terrible. Horrific stories, not only on the opponents and people that have suffered from this foreign policy, but the people that have carried it out. It's been a terrible toll throughout the world.
I absolutely agree. I think it has had terrible, not only immediate effects, but long-term, multi-hundred-year repercussions that our great-great-grandchildren will be dealing with. So I absolutely agree.
Let's remember Faulkner's perhaps Faulkner's greatest quotation, or one of them: "The past is never dead; it's not even past."
And so, I mean, not only do I agree, but I would absolutely never, ever support anyone that would force you to have your resources taken and used for those purposes. I think that would be immoral. To have a person, to have your resources taken and used for something that violates your moral conscience is one of the most twisted, evil things you can do to a person. I would never, ever support somebody doing that to you. I think that's like absolutely wrong.
For instance, that many states carry out the death penalty, and some voter, citizens, taxpayers object to the death penalty. So, when they're carrying out that sentence, or actually executing a person, they're using taxpayer funds to do it, and that is absolutely objectionable.
So I guess the question then is, don't you think that you should be able to opt out of taxes like that, the taxes that violate your moral conscience? Don't you think that would be a basic?
Yes, we're in agreement. My campaign will give you that choice to opt out, and the Libertarians, I think, in general, have been very clear about trying to give everybody the choice to opt out, but not so easily done. You can, if you just want to be a hermit the rest of your life and somehow avoid everything, that you probably wouldn't have to pay any taxes. But most people don't want to be a hermit. We object. As you and I have talked about, we object to a lot of the things that we see and participate in, and the way that taxation happens. But we still participate.
So, I mean, would you afford me that same respect to be able to opt out of forms of taxation that violate my conscience?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, congratulations.
The
congratulations.
mechanics of how we're going to do that, obviously, I mean, if everybody is opting out, because a lot of billionaires that I've seen and millionaires, they seem to like taxes. They get a lot of benefit from taxes. So I think that, but the people on the bottom obviously are really suffering.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I appreciate us having this mutual respect between us, that we would both not force each other to pay for things that violate our conscience. I would hope you would also realize that that is the voluntarist anarchist position. We will not use force on each other to make the world into what we want it to be. And
good. And I'm glad you brought up the anarchy point. You're probably familiar with the Dallas Accord. You live in Dallas, right?
I do.
So do you remember the Dallas Accord?
Yes, I do.
So, and that was about the definition of anarchy, or how the party would view or deal with it, right?
I am familiar with the Dallas Accord. It wasn't like I participated. I wasn't around in the party back then. So yeah.
But I think it's very important, because a lot of people.
For the people that don't know, can you describe what it is?
Yes. So this was told to me by Lynn Atherton Bloxham, who was certainly. I don't know if she was in the room, but she knew all the participants, and it was because this whole issue of anarchy versus monarchy versus some other form of government, keeps coming up, and it should come up, because if you look back historically, that term anarchy and what it meant over the centuries, and what it means to today's Libertarian Party is, it's related. It's very relevant. And so they decided that the term anarchy doesn't mean that it's chaotic or something. It just means that, it's a form of government that doesn't have to have one soul like a monarch. It doesn't have to have one focus, that every person can be a leader. And we don't have to continue to have that debate about, is anarchy going to be allowed? Can we just move on and allow that word to be used, meaning that it doesn't compromise or demean libertarians, and it's a viable description term. that's not detrimental to the party.
Well, it's the consistent application of the libertarian principle, which I would say is the non-aggression principle. Would you agree?
Well, I'm not authoritative, and I haven't done the research to say, is there a connection between non-aggression principle and anarchy? I mean, I haven't researched that. I mean, I can talk about each one individually. I think libertarians are outstanding in the idea of bringing these concepts to the political, forefront, and they should be discussed. I doubt that the duopoly will ever acknowledge that, but libertarians should be very proud that we can talk about anarchy and we can talk about the non-aggression principle, and we can, hopefully enlighten people. I think most young libertarians like these ideas, and the rest of the world needs to be a little bit more educated.
Oh, I totally agree. Can you tilt your phone down just a little bit so we can see your face again? We're looking at your ceiling. Okay. There we go. Awesome. No, that's fine.
My cell phone went blank, but I didn't know it was still on.
Oh yeah, okay. You're still here. You're still here. So I guess let's then go down some of the main political party planks and just see just briefly. I don't want to go like long form on each topic because there's like 20 of them. So just give me kind of your brief impression, and maybe we can have some fun talking through some of this stuff. So
okay.
What are your thoughts on?
I didn't bring my copy of I usually have a printed out copy of the whole platform, but you're going to have to remind me of each number.
Oh, no. We're not that intensive. So just basically bullet points. What are your thoughts on self-ownership and how it pertains to the Libertarian Party and kind of things that you stand for?
Okay. Certainly the Libertarians believe that even if
I want to know what you just let me clarify for the remainder of this discussion. I literally only care what you think.
Well, you're going to hear it because I don't have a copy of the thing.
Okay.
So you're going to hear what I have to say.
Perfect.
But the Libertarian platform needs to be applauded for recognizing that individuals have freedom of choice, and even if it is to their detriment, and they end up making choices that hurt themselves, that we should have that freedom.
What does self-ownership mean? What does that mean?
Meaning that we're not going to go out and blame everybody else in the world, which what you can quickly see in the political process is the Republicans and Democrats always want to blame somebody else. They're never going to take any. They only want credit for benefit for the things that work out well, and they never take any responsibility. So as libertarians, we have a very high standard, and that is that we're not going to blame others. That we're going to be responsible, and that we're going to acknowledge. Not only we're asking for freedom to act, but we're going to also take the courage to and accept the responsibility of that freedom.
Awesome. I would say that ownership is the right to exclude others from the use of a thing, and self-ownership is the right to exclude others from the use of this thing, this person thing that belongs to me.
Okay, but we're getting into group politics there, and we're can somebody else control you? And as libertarians, we don't like that. And but culturally, the reality is that you and I grow up in a society, and we're children for a while, and then we become adults, and we don't like. Libertarians are really keen on. We're going to be individual, but we don't like it when other individuals come and violate our space or kill us. We get
that's
upset
true.
about that.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
So is the glass half full or half empty? I mean, 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. You've got to have a balance, and we're never going to have a perfect world. So we have to try to advocate for a better world.
What's a society? You said we live in a society. What is a society?
Very good question. So I'm glad we're getting to some fundamental definitions. So because I loved social sciences when I was in college. So basically, I would just kind of very loosely say that if we're not talking about the individual human walking around and eating and drinking, we're often talking about interacting with other individuals in a group, which could be like a hunting and gathering society, or a little tribe. But then eventually, you might encounter a village or a civilization, and finally a military-industrial complex. So, the whole gamut of things that a society could be, but just loosely, it's the group of other people that you might come in contact with.
So a society would be a group of individuals, right? It's just it's a collectivizing term for a group of individuals.
Yeah, I'm not gonna try to get into a technical thing about society. I mean, I just think of it as, if you're not talking about the individual and you're trying to understand, when there's many people in the room or a billion people on your planet, how do you relate to that? I mean, society could be a way to describe it.
Yeah. Okay, next plank on the list would be personal relationships. What do you think about personal relationships?
Well, you and I are totally agreement on this. The government should stay out of it. There is no place for the government because individuals are so complex and so diverse that we need to be able to interact. And of course, it's only when that interaction becomes maybe just too what would you say, too volatile or too unpredictable that we become alarmed. Hopefully we don't need any governance or any way to deal with that interaction between two people. But sometimes, as civilization evolves and we get more technology and science, we we calculate more ways to change the universe, and those come in conflict.
What about abortion?
Glad that the Libertarian Party is going to try to stick to a no plank in the platform that we're going to respect the individual on that and let the individual decide, pro or con, either way. The political party is not going to decide that. It's up to the individual. Now, eventually, of course, the government is going to try to come in and say, well, if it's a late term, and it's past 3 months or what is it, for 20 weeks or 40 weeks or whatever it is, that all of a sudden you're talking about a crime here because it's no longer, it's no longer an unviable fetus, but it's a potential voter, citizen, and taxpayer that somehow is being violated when their life is terminated.
What does Rhett Smith think about it? Is abortion murder?
I'm going to stick with the Libertarian platform because there's no point in my trying to give a medical opinion here when people cannot agree on this. And so I think letting the states address this, because if you're going to talk about, how do you determine what is 20 weeks, what is 40 weeks, what is, if a child is born alive, then is it murder to terminate that child's life?
What do you think?
I would be very reluctant to terminate a child's life after birth.
Well, after birth, okay. So is that where your line is, or is what does Rhett Smith think?
No, I'm not going to have a line because it doesn't help. If you like a line, if you want me as a candidate to give you, the cut in concrete or the cut in stone definition here, go join another candidate or find another political party, because the Republicans and Democrats will give you what you're asking for, but the Libertarians, there's no point in giving you that. You can find your way in the world without the Libertarians giving you that that definition.
Interesting. Can I ask it one more way, and then we'll move on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so let's say that you're elected president.
Yes.
Would you do everything in your power to both eliminate all governmental, controls and restrictions, as well as prosecution of people that did, maybe go after abortion doctors? So fair on both sides, right? You wouldn't prosecute people that had abortion, and you wouldn't prosecute people that, say, attacked an abortion doctor.
Okay, very good. You're diligent for pursuing this, and so I want to go back to the constitutional history. So if we go back to the American Revolution, the Constitution, clearly, the respective states, this is in the purview of the respective states, and that's where it should be now today. And then you can argue this at each level of state government, but not. That would not be, because a lot of times, as you know, my Supreme Court appointment. So let's get to the court appointees, or who judicially, because the president has a lot of power on appointments. It would not be along those lines of pro-life, pro-choice, even though the Republicans and Democrats clearly are going to make that, the litmus test. But for me, the litmus test would be the First Amendment freedom, and predominantly in American judicial systems, we've only had the Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish jurists. Very few jurists or judges that are not, or justices, or whatever you want to call them, that are not part of that theocracy. So that's my number one. So you probably didn't even think of that question, but I think it should really be the predominant question for any presidential candidate. Are your nominees for judges going to be all the traditional theologies and theocracies, or are we going to actually, expand and have pluralism? There you go, pluralism back in our system.
What about the death penalty?
Well, as libertarians, no, we do not approve of the state terminating human life, period. But the reality is, me personally, in certain situations, yes, I would like to carry that death penalty out, but not ask the taxpayers, not ask the state to do that. Perhaps we could just have a death commission, or a group of private individuals that come forward and say, once a person has had a fair trial and they've determined that, this person, conspired to kill another person, and in a very malicious and for no good reason, they terminated another life. Would I like to terminate their life? Yes.
Oh, you mean like the victim's family or something like that?
Sure. Yeah, I would. But as I said, I think we could find a way to do it without, because as you and I, we've talked, I believe that if any voter, citizen, or taxpayer objects to carrying out the death sentence, and there's always somebody in the state that objects, it shouldn't be carried out under the authority of the state, or the auspices of the state, or with the taxpayer. They should just release the defendant who's been convicted, and let some people who have agreed to carry out that death sentence quickly do so. Whether
so it's still the death penalty. It's just not the state carrying it out.
Correct.
How is that a distinction without a difference?
Well, you're going to go through quite a difference here, because for one thing, how would you find people to carry out the death penalty? You would have to have determine, who could appropriately do that if the state or taxpayers are not going to do it. And is there a way to do that? I mean, otherwise we're talking about life sentences. Maybe you could have life without parole. That's fine. Life without parole is fine with me. But the reality is some of these people have, I can think of a few cases in Texas where people have done terrible crimes and somehow or another they've managed to get free, either by a court or maybe they've escaped or whatever, and they're out committing the same crime again, more violence.
All right, moving on. Self-defense. What are your thoughts on self-defense? Do I have an inviolate right to defend myself against all forms of aggression?
Wow. Like the topic that
thought that would be an easy question.
Yeah, it should be an easy question. We as libertarians certainly we always have that right, and I think the party platform actually says, well, we can even enlist others to go out and help us defend ourselves. But what we're doing is, if I have to employ a atomic bomb or a nuclear bomb in order to defend myself from somebody else that I feel threatened by, you understand where this is leading.
Well, it's not self-defense if you're creating a bunch of innocent victims, right?
Right. But, if you're using weapons that can discharge, around every second, like, I don't know how quickly some of these automatic weapons we don't have automatic weapons. I know that we don't have the military style, but we have semi-automatic weapons that can discharge very rapidly. There's a question there. How many innocent people die when something like that happens?
What about this kind of goes to taxation as well. So I was going to ask you, what about government spending and debt and government employees and government employee unions? But all of that kind of goes away without taxation. And I think we agreed, or it seems like we've kind of gone back and forth. So let's just clarify this. In the beginning, you said that you did see some valid forms of taxation. And then shortly after that, we both kind of had a mutual understanding that we would both give each other the respect of not using government to force each other to pay for things that we don't consent to. So those are kind of opposite positions. And so I guess what form of taxation would you force on me might be the best way to ask that question.
Okay. Rhett Smith, personally, I would never force anything on you as a candidate. Again, as a Libertarian candidate, I would.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that, Rhett. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. As a Libertarian candidate, I would like to always give everybody the option to opt out. But if somehow Rhett Smith is elected and that happens, and I say, okay, everybody, 300 million taxpayers are going to have the option to opt out, what do you think the result would be? I'm asking you a question. I'm just arbitrarily kind of hypothetical. Would 300 million people say, oh, good, man, I'm not going to pay any taxes? Or would 300 million people, most of them say, oh, yeah, we like the taxes and we're going to continue to pay them? Or is it just the person that that somehow it got caught not paying taxes? He's the one that's going to object. What do you think would happen if Rhett did that? And, I became the president and I said, nobody has to pay any taxes.
I think the first April 15th, maybe half or more would not pay, and then the next year would be a learning experience for the half that did, to realize that there's a lot of people that didn't pay, and that next year the taxes that they're going to have to pay to maintain the same governmental services are going to be effectively double, because there's half as many people paying taxes. And again, I want to caveat this by saying that no one pays taxes. Taxes are always extorted non-consensually by force. But just the common parlance of paying taxes will go.
Patrick, I know that you and Daniel have a pact that that talks about taxation and stuff. But the fact is,
just to clarify, I have literally never spoken to Daniel on any kind of live stream. We don't have a relationship. I don't know the guy.
But he does have a cool hat. The
Okay.
big yellow taxation and stuff hat. Anyway, but I'm going to have to move locations here because this is a public senior center and it's about to close. So I'm going to walk around and get in my car. But
okay, we can start angling towards wrapping up. That's fine.
No, we can keep going. The taxation is theft. I disagree with you. I think that you would find that at the state, local, and federal level, and on and on and on, that people believe in taxation, and you would be surprised that if we gave people the choice of not paying taxes, that they would not take it, that they would continue to pay them.
Okay, but even if 5% or 10% didn't pay, the next year, the 90% that we're going to pay again their tax bill would be higher because of the 5 or 10% that didn't. And so surely,
what's going to happen
recursively,
is, but what's going to happen is, can you see me still? Is the light good? What's going to happen is people are just going to become more angry than they already are, because the people that are paying are going to say, man, these are a bunch of deadbeats, and if you're not going to pay your taxes, maybe you shouldn't be living here anymore, right? What are the choices there?
So does the government govern by the consent of the governed, or does the government derive its just powers from the fact that I reside here?
Well, I love the consent of the governed, and that was actually the name of a government textbook that I had in college. But that's part of the American Revolution. So, again, it is my goal, and it should be the goal of the libertarians across the nation, to educate people about the American Revolution and how incredible. I mean, it's still kind of miraculous when you look back that it could actually work, because, as you know, some places it doesn't seem to work.
So I guess you're calling me a deadbeat.
No, I'm not.
Well, okay, so this is a fundamental question, and if you're wanting to use the Libertarian Party platform to teach people, to educate people, especially on the Founding Fathers' ideals, and one of their ideals was the consent of the governed. Yes. I think this is an important point to discuss. So the government either derives its just powers from the consent of the governed, meaning that the people that live here have to consent to the government for it to have just powers, or it derives its just powers from the fact that people reside here. And anyone that lives here is basically governed by fiat and can be imposed, any tyranny can be imposed on them. And just because they choose to continue living here, they consent to it. It's one or the other. Either you can kick people out that don't...
I understand your argument, and well stated, but I will remind you that the 14th Amendment, as you know, due process and equal protection, that it was passed after the Civil War. And what did that mean? That meant that all those people, indigenous people, Indians, slaves, on and on and on, that had somehow been denied their citizenship or equality, would now, by virtue of where they resided, if it was the geographic determination or jurisdiction of the government, that all those people would have due process and equal protection. So I think that you're wrong in your assessment and evaluation that everybody is oppressed. I mean, essentially that you're...
we're talking about consent of the governed. Where does it come from? Where does the just powers of the government come from to override my consent? Where does that derive from?
From you, Patrick. You're doing it. Yeah, I know you want to find somebody else, but
I don't know what that means. I don't want to find anybody else. I'm enjoying this conversation, Rhett. If you are too, then let's continue.
Okay, so let's continue. So, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. So where does the just powers of the government to override my consent derive from?
There is no just power to override you as an individual, because that I think we could have that conversation. Did the American Revolution actually create a libertarian revolution? Is the American Revolution the libertarian revolution? Can we agree that governance only happens if the individual is a participant, and then otherwise it's not governance anymore. It's actually something
tyranny.
else.
Tyranny.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you say that if I want to withdraw my consent and if I want to opt out, then I have to leave. Well, that's the opposite of consent of the governed. Like if consent of
I'm not saying that. Hold on, you're putting words in my mouth. I'm saying that.
Well, I certainly don't intend to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, if we had the question of what happens on taxation, and the answer I gave was, you said if Rhett, the new president, Rhett Smith, decided, let's pass a law that taxation is completely voluntary and we're not going to collect any taxes anymore and blah blah blah, that you said, well, most people would eventually stop, and I said the opposite. Most people are going to continue paying taxes, and that most people agree with that, and that I'm not saying that that the president, is going to come down on your head. I'm saying, all these other people that are in the system that find out about Patrick not paying his taxes, what are they going to do?
Well, they're going to either get violent or they're going to stop paying taxes themselves.
No, Patrick is going to be begging for somebody to come protect him from all these people that are angry.
Well, with all the money that I didn't pay in taxes, I would be able to afford a self-defense company to protect me.
Patrick, give me some clue here. What's going on? It's like, did you pay $100 in taxes or $1 million in taxes? What exactly did you pay in taxes that's going to be so wonderful that you can divert this money and create an army?
Well, I can give you a concurrent modern example of a defense company that is in Detroit, Michigan. It's called the Detroit Threat Management System, or Center,
Good.
Detroit Threat Management Center. The guy's name is Dale Brown. And the cost to the residents of Detroit to have the protection of his services is $10 a month. Wow, and if you have to call Dale Brown and his company to come protect you if something's going on, they show up and it's $1 a minute. So if it takes his crew an hour to resolve the problem, you have paid a grand total of $60 that month for protection. And if he's doing a bad job, or if he abuses you, or if he does something you don't like, you stop paying him.
I understand. But this is over and above all the other law enforcement agencies that might impinge that location.
No, this is Detroit. This is where the cops no longer patrol because it's gotten too bad. So you have a worst case scenario with a private company, and it costs about $10 a month. But let's say that it costs a lot more than that. Let's say it's like $50 a month. Fine. Okay. That's easy for anybody to afford. I can definitely afford to pay that out of the money that is no longer extorted from me in taxes.
Okay, I understand what you're saying there, but it sounds like a desperate situation up there in Detroit. And the problem is, you're going to quickly get into vigilante type justice systems here, where a few people decide that they should be the judge, jury, and executioner, and that somebody violated them, and they're gonna use whatever force they have and whatever agreement they have privately to protect themselves. That makes sense?
So like now.
You're educating me about Detroit. I'm not sure what the heck's going on in Detroit, but I mean, if you're talking about San Antonio, I don't know what you're talking about. It's a different situation here in San Antonio than what you're describing in Detroit.
Well, it was probably a much more peaceful situation in San Antonio than in Detroit, Michigan, where the cops no longer patrol because they're too scared. So I would think if it works in Detroit for $10 a month, it would certainly work in San Antonio.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but if it's really too scared, I don't know who the mayor of Detroit and the governor of Michigan is right now, but I found that a little bit hard to believe because I think they would, if they were really scared, that they would call in enough forces to quell the fear.
Google it, man. It's a fascinating story in Detroit right now. I'll as we continue through these topics, I'd like to open the floor to questions from our viewers. So if you guys have any questions, please preface your question with like question in all caps so that I make sure and see it. Kaysen says, so it seems like Rhett is saying that people will attack me if I don't pay people who will attack me if I don't pay. That's kind of what your argument is.
Well, I mean, it is because you're saying that if I got the election victory and decided that nobody should have to pay taxes, that would quickly change the whole system. And I'm saying no, I don't believe it. I think people like paying taxes and they want to pay taxes and they want the benefit of paying taxes, and that it's only a few people. If Patrick doesn't want to pay any taxes and is going to really make a big issue of that Patrick will be ostracized, not by President Smith, but by other people.
Hey, ostracization is fine. That's all good. So, is that part of your presidential platform then? That you'll make all taxes voluntary?
Oh, absolutely. That's my platform. It's the Libertarian platform, and I'm actually stating that it's already part of the government that we have.
So, considering that it would take, a mass sea change in the population of the country for you to be elected, then maybe I wouldn't be attacked so quickly, and maybe there wouldn't be so many people in that scenario that would continue cucking themselves to taxes. Paying taxes.
Well, let me ask you a quick question because we're talking about some issues here. What do you think of Donald Trump, and is he a libertarian type president? Has he tried to carry out a libertarian mandate during his term?
No, he's holding the office of the president. That is an unlibertarian thing to do.
He's kind of claiming that, a lot of his billionaire buddies did get big tax breaks.
It's an unlibertarian thing to do to hold the position of the president of the United States and not immediately, quit or set about the process of making the entire thing voluntary.
The only thing a libertarian candidate can do once elected is to terminate the office to which he was elected and terminate any other type of governance.
At least terminate any non-consensual aspects of the office, right? So,
Okay, but I've already made the argument that we already have that kind of government in the United States, Patrick. Many people say that it's all consensual.
Well, I don't consent, so they're wrong. We just proved them wrong right here. I just said I don't consent, so it's not all consensual.
And maybe there's some other libertarians that are like Patrick, but
but consent isn't collective. Like it doesn't. There's no magical percentage somewhere in between 0 and 51 that overrides individual consent. So all it takes is me. And if the government does derive its just powers from the consent of the governed, the moment I withdraw my consent is the moment the government should stop affecting my life.
Interesting. Well, let's try to. Maybe you and Daniel can explore that. And
maybe I need to talk to Daniel because you keep talking about Daniel. I don't know.
But Daniel is the guy with the big yellow hat that says taxation is theft. Anyway, but there's got to be a way for us to come together and figure a way that if you don't want to pay any taxes at all, that could be achieved.
So we have a question. Be a way to do it. We have a question from Matthew Sands. Does he, talking about you, does he agree that all drug laws, gambling laws, prostitution laws, and taxation laws should be abolished?
Oh, the laws that have crimes without victims. As libertarians, we believe that libertarians can take responsibility for their own actions, and we don't have to have the government the nanny state. We don't need a nanny state telling us, that's bad for us and we're going to harm ourselves. We don't need that. It doesn't really accomplish much. And if you look at the whole issue of psychotropic medication, which is another big topic we haven't covered, man, it's and horrific. It's a horror story because when you look at some of these psychotropic medications, they're unpredictable, and giving them out like candy to veterans and children and using this to control people has often ended in tragedy.
Liberty After Dark asks, can you elaborate on semi-automatic weapons being dangerous?
I'm just saying, if you're in a firefight and somebody's using a semi-automatic weapon or you're using a semi-automatic weapon and you believe that you're trying to, control that, that doesn't always happen. So semi-automatic weapons that can rapidly discharge rounds, we don't know where those rounds could end up, and often end up in innocent people.
Are you talking about automatic weapons?
No, there are no automatic weapons. Okay, nobody talks about automatic weapons because that's just something that's kind of off the chart, because we usually don't talk about the military. So we're only talking about legally obtained and manufactured weapons which are semi-automatic and they can rapidly discharge.
Peaceful Easy Feeling just donated $100 to the stream, says, hope all is well, sir. Peaceful Easy Feeling, you in with the massive donations are insane. I appreciate you, sir. I thank you very much for your generous donations. If you want to reach out to me and let me know who you are, I will be happy to give you, the benefits of your support, because you provide well into the levels of support to get all the fancy perks. So let me know. I appreciate your support, sir. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. What about licensing for like doctors and lawyers and things like that?
So in other words, government regulation of things that traditionally we viewed as like you said, lawyers, that
doctors,
doctors,
lawyers,
that's kind of questionable because the bar regulates that, and that's more kind of a consensus of the law. As far as medical doctors, and there are naturopathic doctors and people that don't need a lot of regulation. So I think that we're, maybe oversimplifying this, because medical schools and different agencies establish different, what would you call it, accreditation, and there's not any overriding way to talk about this in every case.
Sure, it's real simple. If I practice medicine, if Patrick Smith goes out tomorrow and starts a medicine practice and I start practicing medicine on people, do you support me being, thrown in prison or because I didn't get a license to do so?
Well, that in South Texas we have curanderos, right? So these are what would you call them? Midwives and other people like that. There's sometimes very little regulation on some of these, and naturopathic doctors.
Do you support me being jailed for practicing medicine without a license?
I would support you being jailed for lying to the people, and libertarians believe that if you're defrauding people or actually trying to be compensated in some way fraudulently by claiming something that's not true, that yes, you should be prosecuted.
What do you mean claiming something that's not true?
Well, that maybe that you're claiming that you went to medical school or that you had been trained as a medical professional if you never did any of that training, and now you're claiming that you should be paid for that.
Okay, I see. So if I had the training, I just didn't have the license, What
Well,
then?
I mean, if you have the training, you're going to get the license, and obviously there's
No,
going
but
to
what if
be.
I didn't?
Okay, so you went through the training, and then somehow or another you avoided getting certified or taking your boards, or something else happened, and
Yeah, maybe I
then
went to another country or something, and I apprenticed under a doctor and followed him around and learned everything he
you can
learned.
certainly do that. But should you be, when you're in another country, practicing medicine, being certified, and that happens all the time, and then you come back to the United States, and now you're saying that you should be compensated or paid because in some other place that you were paid and compensated for this kind of activity, should you be receive that benefit here? And we're saying, well, wait a minute, how do we know, that it would have met, the local board or the local medical school? We don't. So we're going to have to verify again that in fact you're going to be able to practice in a system. In other words, the
Who
state,
has to
there is a
verify?
role
Who
for the
is
state.
we?
If the state, if you and I want to go to court against each other, that would be we, and I'm a complainant, or and you're I'm a plaintiff, and you're claiming that I owed you money because you're a medical practitioner, and then I'm saying, well, wait a minute, you're defrauding me because you're not someone that I would recognize, in the state that I live in doesn't recognize you. Then how are we going to resolve that? We're going to have to go to court, and what's the court going to say?
Well, who gets to determine if I have requisite medical training besides the client contracting for my services?
So you're saying client or buyer beware that every time somebody gets defrauded, well, I
I didn't say anything about fraud.
You're saying it, Patrick, but you're saying two different things. You're saying I can practice whatever I want and get compensated in whatever way, and then but I don't really have to prove that that I'm a competent person. So which is it? Do you have to prove to the client that you're competent, or you don't?
We've lost your video feed. Maybe turn your phone back on or something. Make sure. Oh, there we go. There we go. So I'll make it as simple as I can. A person comes to me and asks me to treat them, and pays me money, and I treat them. Do you support somebody throwing me in a cage if I do that without a license?
There's just too many legal questions there, Patrick, for me to, have a competent answer there. I mean, was the client aware of what was going on? Were you trying to trick the client, or did y'all have maybe you just have an agreement to do something here? I'll give you a beer and make you feel better. And you have to pay me for that. Why do we have to worry about whether the government should regulate that?
So if I go into a barber shop and I pay somebody to cut my hair and they do it without a license, do you get to throw them in a cage? Like, let's say they totally screw it up. Like they mess up my hair or whatever.
Exactly. But we're going to get back to the same questions. Was there a third party, what do they call it, arm's length transaction here? Did everybody understand what was involved here? Maybe you never told me that you were a barber, and I just said, hey, I'd really like to have a nice haircut, and we agreed, and then now I'm upset because, man, it didn't look the way I wanted, and maybe I got hurt when you were cutting my hair. Now, what are we going to do? We're going to go to court and say, did you tell me that you were licensed, or you were not licensed, or that you had been trained in a certain way, or you hadn't,
In a situation where no fraud had been committed, like I am not falsely advertising my training, I'm not defrauding anyone. It's a person consensually pays me money and consensually accepts my treatment. But I do it without a license.
Do you understand what I'm saying is, is it going to be something that we can take to court? As libertarians, you and I know that there's always this stipulation that are we acting fairly, or is there something that we've agreed on? Is there a mutual consent here? So now you're asking me a question that kind of doesn't make sense. Was there something mutually agreed upon before this started, and now it's been invalidated, or was there any fraud at any time in the inception of this transaction?
I said no. There was no fraud.
But you've already admitted that there was, Patrick.
No, I specifically said
why
with no fraud.
Why would I come to you and say, "Oh man, I need a $100 haircut," and Patrick says, "Yeah, I'm going to give you a $100 haircut," and then I say, "But I thought you were a licensed barber," and you're saying, "No, no fraud. I'm not a licensed barber." Did you tell me you were licensed or not?
I mean, I just went to this consciousness and wellness event where a bunch of people do a bunch of drugs to help heal themselves emotionally, and they definitely have people that are not licensed, and they go to each other for medical care, and it's unlicensed and it's consensual. Are you saying that these people should be locked up?
No, unlicensed. Everybody consented. I mean, no way. I mean, remember the cases where they went to these. What do they call it? Sweat lodges, and they got the temperature so high, some of these people died. Well, they voluntarily went into there, knowing that you're going to put your life at risk in a sweat lodge, and they died. I mean, how should they, how should the practitioners be punished when there was no fraud?
Okay, what about, let's see, we have like 6 more items on the list. You have time, or let me know if you got to go. How about that?
Let's do it.
All right, cool. So okay. Sex work is next.
Okay.
Do you support those people being...
Okay. What are you
What's your position on sex work?
So you want to... In other words, is the government involved here, or what if?
What is Rhett Smith's position on sex work? That's what I want to know. All of this stuff. I want to know Rhett Smith's position. I don't want to know the Libertarian Party's position. I don't want to know the Society's position. I want to know Rhett Smith's position.
We have to set the parameters here, and it's not just Patrick and Rhett. There is no.
Whoa. Hey now.
Okay. Sorry. So Patrick and Rhett say, "Oh yeah, whatever happens. Well, how's the government involved there? Or somebody goes to a brothel or someplace, I guess Nevada, or some of the few places where these activities are legal. I think it's someplace in Europe they have that legal. It seems to me that the government is offering a great service there. That the government is saying, "Hey, we'll help regulate these brothels and make sure that if people want to come and have a good time, and they're willing to, money changes hands, and everybody is having a good time and agrees to it beforehand. What's wrong with that? And the government helped you regulate, but maybe somebody says, "Oh, I'm going to come here and offer $100, and then at the end, I'm really upset, and I'm just going to pull out my gun and rob everybody." I mean, that could also happen.
So what if it's just 2 people outside of a licensed brothel just wanting to get together and trade money for sex?
Then what in the world? I mean, doesn't that happen every day? Why is anybody even involved with that kind of a...
All right. Fair enough. I agree with you. Okay, unions. What do you think about unions? What's Rhett Smith's position on unions?
Well, is it voluntary, or do they force you to, in order to work some places, you have to pay union dues? And as libertarians, we object, especially if it's a government employees group. I mean, what in the world? This is really I'm really an objection personally to some of the unions here that I see in San Antonio and Bexar County, where we have the police union, for instance. This is insane. This is totally a violation of every libertarian principle to have the government, who is the police officer, they're acting with the authority of the government, and then they have a union. That's insane.
I got to compliment you. Out of every single question I've asked so far in this entire interview, this was your best answer, in my opinion. And it was because of like the first 5 words you said after I asked the question. Well, yeah. Is it voluntary? Like that should be the answer to every single question that we've talked about here today. Is it voluntary? Yes or no? If it's not voluntary, it's not libertarian, it's coercive, it's immoral.
I mean,
I don't think we totally agree.
I'm in agreement with you, Patrick. I'm in agreement with the libertarians. I think this is just kind of a semantic difference that you and I just have a little bit different perception of the world. But we should. There should be a voluntary way to achieve the future. We don't have to coerce each other or the whole world. I mean, in theory, there should be a voluntary. And here's the last question I'm going to ask you.
Suppose, you can ask me all the questions you want. You don't have to limit them.
Is there a way, if there were a way, could we now, number one, give a provisional ballot so that every single person all the time would have a provisional ballot to vote in every single election all the time? And number two, could we set up an account so that every person on this planet would have a financial services bank account or a financial services access? And how would the world be improved if every single person could vote all the time and every single person had access to financial services all the time?
Well, not every single person, right? Like not kids, not babies, not coma patients.
Well, I mean, if they don't want to participate, or they're too, they're just, some people, yeah, I agree with you. Some individual souls are just not ever going to be able to handle something like that, for age or malady or for whatever reason. We're not going to force people to do those things. But if they would like to have a bank account, or if they would like to have a provisional ballot, what about that? Wouldn't that be a better world?
Is it forced on everyone?
No, total voluntary.
It's the exact same answer. If it's voluntary, I literally don't care. Like, you do you. If that's how
you should support it. I mean, it would be. Wouldn't it be a better world if people actually felt that they had access and freedom to do the things that some people take for granted?
Well, democracy is inherently oppressive to 49%, right? So if everybody got to vote, then if the people that voted no on something got exempted from the effects of that of the yes vote, then that would be moral. That's moral democracy. Immoral democracy is when the 49% that vote no still have the yes vote winners subjected to them.
The right, you and I, for the most part, you and I have the right to go to court anytime, any place, anywhere, and state our objection. Certainly, I was the person 4 years ago that was running for president on the First Amendment platform. I call it First Freedom. And as you know, the 45 words in the First Amendment certainly create, to me, it's the pinnacle of the American Revolution. The most powerful part of the American Revolution says that the most powerful government in the history of the world and the most powerful branch, the Congress, shall make no law. Congress, the most powerful government in world history in the universe, cannot make a law respecting religion or prohibiting it or abridging the freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, the freedom of petition, the freedom to assemble.
All right. I guess the last topics are kind of dual topics. National defense is a good place to start.
Okay.
What's your position on national defense? If it's does it have to be funded coercively or voluntarily?
Voluntary.
Beautiful.
I mean, we're totally in agreement on voluntary. The word is what libertarians believe in. It's our platform. It's my platform. So if you know of some other presidential candidate that's opposed to voluntary, let us know, because they're going to be ostracized from the party.
You would hope, but I'm not so sure. All right, so borders then would be the last one. Border enforcement. What are your thoughts on the borders?
So I don't know if you saw any of my pictures. Some of the pictures are on the border of Rhett Smith on the border with the Witness at the Border plan, with the Interfaith Welcome Coalition, and with the RICES, which is a law group here that has immigration lawyers. RICES is an acronym. That's RAICES, Refugee and Immigrant Center for Education Service. So we're on the fight, at the front line of the fight, trying to be there on the border. I was in Brownsville and Matamoros, got a passport so I could, actually you don't need a passport to go into Mexico, but if you want to get back, from Matamoros back in Brownsville, you better have a passport, or otherwise it's going to be a very, very long day. We went down and met at the encampments there, because we no longer have encampments in the United States due to the Trump policy. And as libertarians, we believe people should migrate freely, and to actually credit for President of the United States support anywhere, people being able to seek migration or seek asylum in the United States.
All right. So it really feels like we went back and forth on the voluntary thing. Can you hear me? I think we're losing connection here. Can you hear me?
I'm here.
Okay, awesome. So it feels like it feels like we went back and forth between being in solid shoulder to shoulder agreement on the voluntary thing, but then we also kind of go back to
we're in agreement on the voluntary thing. The problem is that you see a world where everybody is oppressed and coerced, and so it's the woke movement. I'm saying, are libertarians the most woke people on this planet or not? And I'm saying that there's a lot of voluntary actions that happen in the United States that you're calling involuntary.
Name one.
People pay taxes.
No one pays taxes. Taxes are extorted.
Voluntarily, they pay taxes.
What happens if you don't pay taxes?
Well, somebody's going to come knock on your door.
Are they going to knock on my door in a voluntary way?
To start out with, hopefully, unless you live in a really bad locale. But yeah, initially they're going to want to know what's going on, and why you decided that you're no longer going to do what maybe you have been doing in the past.
Okay, and if I say get the fuck off my property, then what happens?
Then hopefully this goes to court, but I'm not disputing that they could bring guns.
And what if I don't show up to court?
Yeah, eventually, there's going to be an apprehension.
And is that apprehension going to be voluntary?
No, not on your part. No, that's not. In other words,
so taxation is theft. We got there. Yes. Yes, because taxation can't be voluntary, because at the end of the road, there is a government gun pointed at my face, right?
Patrick, some libertarians do not agree with you.
Tell me how I'm wrong. I want to learn. I want to learn how I'm wrong. Educate me.
I'm saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that, some libertarians believe that constitutional taxes are something that we agree to.
Well, I will. I'm not part of that we. But I'm not interviewing some libertarians. I'm interviewing Rhett. So what does Rhett think?
Okay, and I'm with the mainstream libertarians. It's in our platform that says that we understand constitutional taxation if it's absolutely necessary.
So you support violating my consent?
Well, if you're in the minority of libertarians who think that that the government can never collect voluntary taxes and that you have been violated, yeah, I think you're in a minority, because most libertarians don't agree with you.
So you would support me being thrown in a cage for not paying taxes?
No, absolutely not. I wouldn't support any kind of violence against you, but I'm just saying sometimes violence happens in our world, and I believe that even now you're seeing the this is the crazy thing, because I think you're right that the government does act violently against people. They all you see the IRS and others saying, "Oh, let us if you've got this huge tax burden, call us and we'll try to help you. Find a way." So they're all too conciliatory now, but in the past they've been very violent. The government has been violent, and now they're very conciliatory because they I don't know, it's very duplicitous, no doubt about it.
All right, Mr. Smith, thank you for having the balls to subject yourself to my show and this conversation. You deserve credit for that much, at least, if nothing else. I've enjoyed this conversation. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Yes, please make your campaign contributions to RhettSmithForPresident.com. And I really need your support, Patrick, you personally, and any of your Texas listeners, to attend the Texas State Libertarian Convention in McAllen, Texas in April. And I'm still trying to be part of that conversation, even though I'm an official candidate. I did not get to, they had what they call it, vote with your dollars, and I did not get enough dollars to be in the top 5. So I'm still upset about that. You want to know what I'm upset about? I'm upset about that.
All right. Well, it's been fun. I enjoyed this conversation. I will talk to you again sometime in the future. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.